Okay, well, welcome to Tanya's tour. You could introduce yourself and what would you like to learn about in this tour?
Hello, my friend. My name is Timur. I want to learn more about South Africa and about history of South Africa because I'm not from here, so it'll be very interesting for me to know.
Perfect.
Hello, my name is Mazizi. I want to learn how black people actually got into the city, because like cities were only for white people. So how did they get in?
I'm Mona, and I'd just like to learn more about South Africa and the culture.
Hello, my name is Olga. I'm here to find out something more about the history of South Africa.
Hi, my name is Gunther. Also just here to find out more about the history of South Africa, especially Durban.
Hello, my name is Gloria. I'm also here just to learn about the history.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'd like to learn more about what's happening in this nondescript building that I've been driving past for years. Haven't been to the museum. We'll see.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I hope I will somehow reach your objectives today. We will definitely learn more about history of Durban and South Africa in general. I'm actually very pleased to see that there are few people that are citizens of South Africa, and I will still be opening something new to you. I will be asking you a few questions along the way. I'm sure you will be able to actually help me with that, because I've been in South Africa for only a year right now. Yeah, so we'll start. Okay, perfect. So our tour will take approximately 1 hour. We will learn about the segregation in South Africa, why it happened, how the system worked, and what were the repercussions for South African movement. A few house rules. You are welcome to take as many pictures and videos as you please. Just please use them only, keep them only for your personal use. Please abstain from drinking and eating, smoking inside. You are welcome to smoke just outside by the parking lot. Another thing that I would like to point out is the bathrooms. They will be just to the left through the gallery there. You're welcome to ask me questions at any time. Stop me in order not to forget the question. I like to be interrupted. And we will be meeting here at the end of the tour. I will give you about 10-15 minutes after to just look around and explore by yourself. And we will be meeting here, which is the entrance and the exit, simultaneously in about 1 hour and 10 minutes. So let's start. If I may, I'll close them very shortly. I'll open them very shortly. So let me close those doors and ask you, what does it look to you?
Prison.
Prison?
Yeah.
Mas?
That's like a torture, some mysterious bunker, I don't know.
That's a very good interpretation. Prison, bunker is something that comes to your mind straight away. Jail. And I think it's very special that we're actually here today, which is just 2 days past the Reconciliation Day that we celebrated last Sunday. Does any of you know what Reconciliation Day meant and means still to South Africa? Seth, tell us.
To reconcile a very bad past and move on to a better future.
That's very well said. The Reconciliation Day was actually before a Day of Covenant, where on that day there was a battle of Blood River, if any of you know about this. Yes? What do you know about it?
The Boers.
The Boers, exactly.
Also, British. From what I heard, yeah, no, but they know the Boers, British, about British and
exactly. So,
technically, colonists.
Yes.
Colonists.
Yes. So they were migrating to that part of the world, to the Zululand, and they were attacked by Zulus. So there were approximately 500 of Boers, with a lot more of Zulu warriors, and unfortunately over 3,000 of Zulus were killed in this battle because of the weapons that was had. Exactly. So the river by which they were fighting turned bloody, turned red. So that is why that day was called the Battle of Bloody River. Now that was the day when it happened on the 16th of December, and for many Boers it was a sign from God that they are superior to African people. And that day was celebrated year and year and year for many years until, and for Africans that day was also very special because that was the day where the major protests and sabotages were taking place. The reason why I'm talking about it is on the 16th of December in 1961, that place was actually the first ever place of sabotage by the Spear of the Nation that was created on the same day. So a little bomb was planted just by the doors, and unfortunately they were not very experienced at that time, so it didn't cause any damage whatsoever. So the guerrillas had to come back with a Molotov cocktail, with the fire. They had to call...
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The fire brigade had to come and extinguish the fire, but there was no damage pretty much caused, but the point was made. Now, the first question that I'd like to ask you is, why that place, that was a place of shame, that was despised by so many people for so many years, why choose that place to be a museum? Mona? Go ahead.
To give to help better in the future, to learn from your mistakes, and to also just see that, just look back at what happened.
That's exactly right. So I'd like you to look at this plug that says, this is a museum about power and powerlessness and the struggle for dignity by ordinary people. Let this never be forgotten. Let us be mindful of the abuses of the past and celebrate the human capacity in all its diversity and richness to overcome. So this was the part of the proposal that was compiled when they were planning to, when they were proposing that place to become a museum. And in 1996, the museum officially opened its doors. So let's proceed to the first. Oh, you want to take a picture? What's this? That's a pass, a dome pass. We are going to go through just now.
Ah, I think that'll work.
There is a strong AC now, so I hope you will all feel comfortable here.
It's nice and peaceful.
So this first exhibition is the foundation of the Durban system. Now, Durban system served more or less as a blueprint of apartheid, and not just in Natal, but all over South Africa. A lot of things that were implemented by Durban system and worked very well were taken aboard on the in the other provinces of South Africa. So the Durban system consisted of four main components. So the first one was the influx control, something that must specifically want to learn about. So it's the control of African people entering the city, and the rules, the acts, and the dome passes. The second component was the beer monopoly. The third, creation of the beer halls, and the fourth, of course, the segregation of the accommodation, so providing the segregated accommodation to other races. So here we are looking at a pass, a dome pass. Now let's have a look what the information was there in the past. So you have the personal details. Interestingly enough, you don't see the citizen of South Africa, right? Because the Africans, even though they were majority in South Africa, were not really considered to be citizens, rather than the citizens of the township that they belonged. Then you have the information of when well, basically the work permit, that they were medically examined, and then they paid their tax. The record of their employment history. And the tax receipt.
The passport, then?
Yes. It was more or less like a passport. Exactly, exactly. Like everything that's... Exactly, and we had something called as the labor book in Russia, where they would write down all the places of employment, but that had to be carried at all times. Now, if you were stopped in the street, like this poor gentleman over here with a guy at blackjack, why do you reckon the policemen were called blackjacks?
Because they kind of constantly, you know, like, hey, what's up with you? And they're constantly like as black people. So maybe.
Yes, part of it that they were not really liked. To say it kindly. A lot of the policemen were actually Africans, colored people, that were pretty much the neighbors of those people that they were arresting. So they chose the path of being, of serving the white government for the remuneration. Now, you had to carry a pass at all times, and that pass was sometimes up to 100 pages thick. What would happen if you didn't have a pass with you?
You probably get arrested.
You get arrested, exactly. Immediately. So now if you would like to see exactly how the passbook looked, it's right here. It was donated by one of the gentlemen. Alright, let's move on. Yes. Now, one thing that I have forgot to mention, I'm sorry in the beginning, I would appreciate if you don't touch the exhibits here. But you're welcome to take pictures and have a closer look. So when was, who can take a guess, when was the apartheid system officially adopted?
After the Anglo-Boer.
Close, but not that. It was almost 1948. That was
1948 was the election.
Election, exactly, and that's when a national party came into place. But if you look at the pass laws right here, you'll be able to see that it started much earlier than 1948. As a matter of fact, here in Natal, back at 1850, there were already certain rules that prevented, that were taking the rights of Africans. Now, after the Anglo-Boer War, like Mas said, the country found itself in a big depression. But also Durban somehow appeared to be third largest city in South Africa. And that created two problems. The first one was that the whites found themselves a minority. So now there were 27,000 of whites as opposed to 30,000 of non-whites. And another, so they obviously wanted to stay away from them to some degree. But another problem was that the city was booming. The city needed to grow. Would white population like to work in the port or in construction?
Probably not.
Probably not. Thank you, Gloria. So for that, they needed to have a lot of cheap labor, and that's where the influx control started. If you look at the past laws in South Africa, the Native Labour Regulation Act was amended in 1911, and that was the act that made all male African people who were single to stay in a hostel. They were not allowed to rent their own accommodation. They had to stay in a hostel that was provided as part of their job for the whole duration of the contract. And the hostel you will be able to see just further down. It really had not even the basic amenities as we like to think of them today. Now, interestingly enough, the beer account supplied plenty of revenue to build those hostels, but by 1916 there was only a quarter of 30,000 Africans that lived in the hostel. There was no hostels available for everybody else. The rest of people were living in the shack settlements because all the money coming into the Durban system, instead of being used for creating suitable accommodation, was used to improving the lives of the white population. In 1922, there was a very, very powerful revolt, the Rand Revolt, that took place. Does anybody?
Yes.
Sam, go ahead.
Rand Revolt was basically up in the Witwatersrand, what was called the Witwatersrand, where they were digging for gold. Basically, the Oppenheimers and the Rhodeses, basically the money makers, realized that a lot of the pay distribution among the skilled white and semi-skilled white workers and the unskilled black workers was very vast. But if they can skill black workers to do the white workers' work and pay them less, they can make more money. And so there was a revolt between the army and a lot of the white miners. White miners got killed, everyone went to the table, and they made a law that said from in future only white miners could have skilled and semi-skilled labor. All black people had to have unskilled labor, and there were a couple of exceptions for semi-skilled labor, which were normally considered very, very dangerous or in spaces unsuitable to everyone, and basically that law stood until 1990.
Perfect. So that's exactly right. The miners, their slogan was "Workers of the world to unite and fight for the white South Africa." So obviously it was put down, and but there were different consequences. So first, as Sam mentioned, the job color bar was created, and another one was the 1923 Urban Areas Act. That was basically the act where the apartheid started, where the segregation of African, non-white and white population took the root, and from then onwards it continued to worsen on until the end of apartheid. So let's move on, and I'll take you back to the name of the museum. Now, I think Sam can pronounce the name actually better than me. I say it KwaMuhle, but how do you say it?
I
KwaMuhle.
Okay, but this does it better. You speak
KwaMuhle. So, what does it mean?
It means. What do you think?
Kwa means true, but
The place.
other word,
Kwa means
I have no
place,
idea.
yes. And Muhle means good. So it means basically the place of the good one. Now, how can this place be called the place of a good one? So that the good one, KwaMuhle, was the nickname of John Sidney Marwick. He was the first manager of the Native Administration Department. The reason why he was called KwaMuhle was because when the Anglo-Boer War started, he was the one who led 7,000 Zulu miners from Transvaal back to the Zululand. So he basically negotiated the pass with Boers and with English side and led them and walked with them for a week to bring them home. So that obviously earned the big respect, and that's why he was called the good one. Now he's Induna. What does Induna mean?
I don't know.
It's vice chief, yes, exactly. So he would be his right hand, and his Induna was Pika Zulu, which was kind of very clever because he was part of the royal family. So if there was any conflict or he needed to mediate the anger of the Africans who were coming here and could not get a pass, he would be the one who would be called in. And because of the big respect that is in Zulu tradition for the royal family, they would listen to him.
One question, which royal family? The Zulu royal?
Zulu royal family, exactly. Now here, like Mas said when we just entered, this is a typical beer hall. Yeah, so this would be the place that would be created by the Durban system to sell beer to Africans. Now you know that, well, you might know or you might not, but Zulu beer is very special to the culture. I'm sorry?
Homebrew is what it's called.
Yes.
In today's parlance.
Yes. And, but Durban system was very clever. What it did was, well, basically how it worked. Let's start with that. Families, the women in the family would be brewing the beer and would be selling it in shebeens, where that would bring income to your family and not just the beer for their own consumption. Now, what Durban system did, they took it away from them. They created monopoly. Only government could brew the beer for sale. So that place was actually right next to the main brewery of the city. And what it made was, first, the women could not anymore make the income, which was very important for them. And the second was that the Africans, after they worked so hard and get their wages, they wouldn't go home to bring money to the family, but they would go back to the beer hall and would spend all the money here. So the money went back into the system. That was plenty to support the system. Basically, the Africans were paying for their own refreshing. That account also supplied the creation and constructions of the townships. And you can see the information about different townships here. If you would like to see how the hostel looked, please.
Question, is this the military police or something?
Police.
This is just the police, yes.
It's a normal police.
It is like the military police. Whoa! Whoa! Stop!
So as you can see, there is not even basic bathroom facilities here. In a lot of time, there was no even electricity supplied. The food had to be made with those utensils.
What kind of
Ish.
So KwaMuhle was the first township that was created. It actually had even a school, it had a hospital there, so it had basic means of living there. Now another area that was very popular and one of the biggest townships is KwaMuhle, and you can still see it exists, right?
It still exists, yes.
So, is there anything that you might share? Who's been to?
But there's also
Okay.
Okay, I have been there, and then also there's this one battle where there was like this one riot in KwaMuhle, and then the police, and then the police just opened fire on these protesting Africans, and they just marched right into KwaMuhle.
There was
And eliminating everybody that they that looked like they were protesting, and they just go and shoot them without question, nothing. Just
yes, that unfortunately was the case sometimes.
He jumped up ahead
Ahead of me, exactly, yes. So basically there is actually a very interesting museum now created in KwaMuhle, so if you would be interested, you should go also have a look. But that was one of the townships that made international headlines in 1949. Now let me tell you a little bit before the riots, to set up the stage basically. Even though Indian population was also non-white, they had more rights than the Africans. What was happening was Indians were actually allowed to own land. So a lot of land in KwaMuhle was owned by Indian landlords and rented out to the Africans. Now, in 1948, just after the Second World War, crisis again in the country, accommodation crisis, and rent prices obviously spike. Now, Africans had enough, and that was the time where they fought Indians, and there was a lot of blood. It was a horrible battle, to the point that the Indian government put an ultimatum to South Africa to protect their people. Now that is one theory of why that took place. Last week we were having a nice tour here with an American lady, and she, having a lot of friends from Indian population, had a different version to it. Basically, the way she was told about it was that the whites provoked the Africans to fight the Indians. To fight the Indians.
Okay.
Basically, you know, instead of them getting together and fighting the minority government, they provoked them to fight between each other. So basically, divide and rule is another theory of why KwaMuhle battle, if you call that this way, happened. Nonetheless, of the reasons why, the Group Areas Act of 1950 actually was introduced to protect, in a sense, the Indian population, and a lot of Africans were removed forcefully from KwaMuhle. Now, I remember me first coming here to that museum, and I was thinking, but why, you know? You can see them, people living in shacks, like real shacks, and then here they are offered something that looks like that, or like this.
Put it over there.
Yes, we'll go through that just now. Why? Why not take it? Well, there were a few reasons for it. First of all, it was theirs. They've lived there for many years. They had a community. They passed laws, didn't work here. They didn't need to. There were no police, more or less, here. They were free. They felt free. Another thing is they were allowed to carry out their own businesses, whether it's the laundry or couriering or cooking, so that they could actually make their own income. And the third reason is they could actually walk from their home to work, and their children could attend schools. Now, once they were moved to KwaMuhle, which was created in 1934, it was 50 kilometers away from the city. You have to spend sometimes half of your wages just to get to work and back. It just didn't make sense.
Not looking at the time. Actually,
exactly.
One of the key things about those shacks is they were on absolute prime land.
Well, and that was the reason why the KwaMuhle
Prime land.
That was the second, apart from segregating the population, the second very important reason for the government to start forceful removals was because it was very close to the city, so the whites wanted the place for themselves. Now, and to do that, they couldn't just come to the shacks and say, okay, you're out of here. What they did in 1934 to legally to be able to do it legally, to forcefully remove people, was they actually passed the Slums Areas Act. So by that act, every house that had less than 3.7 meters per person and didn't have separate bedrooms for children of different sexes was considered a slum. Now I'll tell you honestly, my apartment is the slummiest slum by this note.
So your apartment is in a Florida Road in prime area.
Yes, but it is a slum by this act.
The houses that people were moved into, did they differ from the slums? Did they actually make provision for not being slum? Because according to the code, not really.
Not really, exactly. And the fact that in KwaMuhle, for example, yes, they were making it look a little bit better from the outside, but there were no basic amenities. There was no school, there was no hospital. Umlazi is one of the other townships. It was built in 1967, and it is one of the biggest now in South Africa, and it actually has its own unique legal registration code, which is MUC.
There is a point of view that Umlazi actually is the biggest township in South Africa. Soweto is a combination of different townships that were called Southwest Townships. Southwestern Townships, where when Umlazi is a township.
Single township.
Single township, yes. There are sections A to Z, and then A, B, B, up to double N, I think.
In Umlazi.
In Umlazi. Okay, nice.
That's what it is.
So the forceful removals from KwaMuhle started basically in 1951, and it continued throughout the years. Here is the exhibition that is devoted to women. You strike women, you strike a rock. And here you can see the result of the beer monopoly. Women actually came together in 1959 and they burned the beer halls. You can see the pictures right there. Now we will go further and explore the building, but if you would like to come back to that later, you can see the plan, the layout that this building had as the office of Natives Administrative Department.
This was the building of Native?
Yes, exactly. That's how it used to be.
That's why it's a building of shame in the paint.
In the House of Shame. Yes.
House of Shame, yes. Also, because everybody had to come here, had to pass that.
Что за здание?
Это здание, где выдавались именно фейспасы. Все африканцы должны были прийти сюда, прямо в это здание, чтобы было фейспасы. Shall we? For those of you who likes architecture, you can read a little bit about the architect who designed it, William Jones. He used to work in Spain and Brazil for a long time, so you can see the influence of Iberian architecture style here. Starting from the main entrance, those Tuscan pillars is a very distinctive sign of Iberian architecture, as well as the staircases like that.
Also, I'm just kind of looking at the walls here. And it doesn't look like a safe. A safe. You know? Because like, it looks like a safe to a door. And pretty much that door kind of means that the city is actually safe. And in order to get into the safe, to get into the city, you actually have to lock it.
The key, yes, the key in the sign or in the symbol of the pass.
To me, it looks like school prison.
It does to some extent. So now if you would like to go through here to look at the Kumbani Gallery. Kumbani is basically the name of the river, and it was another name for Cape Town, Kumbani. So here you can see the exhibition of pictures that were taken by the fourth manager of this department, Mr. Gherkin, during the forced removals of Katie Mena. Go ahead, explore. Не все, но какие-то дома, к сожалению, не как везде, все-таки преступность тоже была. A recent addition to that gallery is an exhibition of bottles that were discovered when they were doing the underpinning of the house, of the building. So those bottles were actually discovered underneath the house. Yes.
So they use a lot of American cars during those are priceless, the American cars. That's Flora.
That looks like a ship.
Yeah, it should be Flora.
No, this one looks like a ship. I don't know what that is. I have no idea.
He's too young to know these cars. He's the grandpa.
Let's head to the courtyard.
I have a question about beer. Why was so significant, you know, with all this beer, halls and
Actually, guys, isn't this
For
one?
the government or for the Africans?
This one here resembles a Morris. A Morris. This is a British car. That looks like a British. Yes, looks like a British car. It resembles. I'm not saying it is, but it resembles a British car.
Okay, I have a question.
Olga has a very important, a very interesting question of why were those beer halls so important to Africans? Why would they actually need to go to those beer halls? Instead of boycotting them and saying that no, we are not going there, we will bring the money to the family.
Maybe it was just like a cultural thing, just men sitting down drinking beer, relaxing, I think.
In the villages, the women would brew beer, the men, whether they were on war or they were hunting, whatever, would come back and in the floor they'd sit and drink beer. That was part of the culture. So after a hard day, you have beer, and they call tales and stories, etc.
So it's kind of conversation as
It is a
well.
cultural conversation.
But I believe that women were not allowed to drink, only men. I mean in those days.
But women, even now, only women, only Gogo can
And drink the traditional.
has access to brew the beer.
Oh, okay.
Only Goga can go to that room and brew the beer, right? Am I right?
But and because it was embedded in them from years past, it was difficult for them to just refuse of having them here because there was the being connected, talking about the humiliation that they went through during the day of work. It was an emotional outcry as well to come and talk to somebody about it, right? Yes.
They look at the person by the fact that they lost their freedom and everything.
Exactly.
And English has a good drunk, so they can just.
Exactly. Well, that's true. A lot of people.
Actually, would have heard because of the culture of the Zulu, how Zulu used to drink beer. It's because no man would drink beer alone.
Yeah.
That what do you call it?
Thank you.
Continuity. It would pass from one to one. So you need to have you need to sit for the whole day for which you get seriously drunk. I assume so.
Well, it is in the cultural way.
Hello.
Welcome. Welcome, Rafael. I'm Tanya.
Hi.
So yes, it was a cultural, it was a ritual back at home, but I don't think they followed the exact ritual in the beer hall.
Also, if you think about it, at home it would be a clean thing, and it wouldn't be just distributed and given to you the whole time, because you would sit, you would drink, you would also eat, and you would be in conversation. Whereas in a beer hall, you basically just sit, you moan about your living conditions and everything.
Just moaning.
And before long, it became a habit, which is what they were looking for. We create a habit of you go to work, you come back, you moan, you cry, but you're basically feeding us all the money you're making, you're giving us back.
Exactly.
True. So it's a breaking that
The bond.
bond and that identity, cultural identity, and now the breaking in very, very deep level. Wow.
Let's continue.
I'm just curious because you said it. Yes. When did you arrive?
The day before.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
So this is the courtyard. This is where all the action took place. Imagine that courtyard full with Africans trying to get their pass. The entrance would be through the back door, just across, and people would line up here, queue here, to get medically checked, and then later on to get to that official who would be, depending on the mood that he's in, whether would stamp you that you are allowed to go in the city, or put the stamp that you have to get out of the city in 72 hours. Now it's important to look at that mural. Come on. Follow me. It's probably impossible to believe now that this is what was happening in the 20th century. But the African people would once they come here, they would have to strip naked completely. they would have to be dipped in the disinfectant liquid because white people thought that the Africans are dirty and have a lot of diseases. Afterwards, they would have to queue to be inspected by the doctor. The doctor would have to inspect their private parts to make sure that they don't carry any sexual transmitted diseases. And then later on to queue again to get to that official. Now, if you were allowed to work in the city, you would have to pay. There would be a tax, a poll tax of £1 per month. You would have to come here every month to get the stamp and make sure that that you're still employed in the city.
What?
Exactly.
And even if you will get paid less than £1,
you have to pay. If you get the access to the city, you have to pay the tax. You could see the stamp right there in the past, right? That the tax was paid. This is it exactly. You see £1 general tax.
Why is it after disinfectant water like we dubbed them? Or whatever you call it? Yeah.
Yes. And you can see also the blackjack right here, right? Pointing people and being very rude to them to tell them where to go. Another very famous statue is the Shadows of the Past. It was created by Durban-based artist Del Mo. She still lives in Durban, and it was erected here in 1996 upon opening of the museum. If you come closer. I'd like you to share with me, what do you think that represents the shadows of the past?
I think that it shows them how hard and how much they went to just to survive.
Very good. But look closely at the figures. Do you know those are men or women? They look like men, but look at the private parts. They don't have them. The way we say it now, their balls were cut off, right? Basically, that represents the humiliation and emasculation that they had to overcome. This gentleman doesn't have ears. He doesn't listen. He tries not to hear what is happening around him because he thinks hard about the humiliation that he just went through. And those two are talking quietly about their experience and about how else they can support their family. Because remember, in African culture, the man is the head of the family. He is very well respected. He is the god of the family. And yet, that person, the same person, has to go through all of that. How insulting that would feel. If you look at the testimony of one of the people who actually had to go through that process, he was a young boy, he finally got a job, he thought that, yay, I just need to come here and get the stamp in my pass. He went through the whole procedure. After hours in the endless queue, he finally came face to face with the boss, who was the official, who would be the one to decide. And he looked through his reference book, through his job offer, and he put a stamp there and said, go home. Well, Charles didn't know what that stamp meant. He came to his father and he said, what does that mean? And the father said, well, you have to get out of the town in 72 hours. No explanation why, no, you know, if you do this, you will be able to work. No. So obviously the humiliation and the powerlessness that the African people had to endure in this city, well, and in the whole country, had to erupt somehow, right? And that's how the freedom struggle started. And I would like to take you to another hall over there that is air conditioned. I'm sorry that it is such a hot day. To tell you a little about one person that was internationally acclaimed. Yes, we are out of the sun, but it's not as cold as I would want it to be. So this exhibition is called Why I Did It. It is devoted to Andrew Zondo. Andrew Zondo was a 19-year-old boy still who who planted a bomb in a predominantly white shopping center in Imanzitoti in 1985 that killed 5 people. He was subsequently jailed and executed in September 1986. So this exhibition tells you why he did it and what brought him to that act. Andrew Zondo was born in Port Shepstone. Thank you for joining my tour. So he was born in Port Shepstone, and when he was 3 years old, he moved to KwaMuhle township. He was a very talented academic, so he was studying at school and he loved studying. He was very well versed in political debate, and he actually wanted to become a doctor. But now when he was 14 years old, the high school students from another school invaded his school and protested against Bantu education. So they called for all the pupils, for all the students to stop studying. The Bantu education was another product of the Durban system, which was specifically designed not to give successful path to the Africans, but rather give them basic skills and keep them not promote independence, so to say. So that was, when he was 14 years old, that was the first time that he learned that he was actually not trying to be as successful as he can be in life, and by studying he would actually achieve, like an American dream, anything he wished for. But by studying in the Bantu education, he wouldn't be actually achieving much. And then later on, in 1981, he witnessed an attack on a prayer service in his township, and then that was the time when he started to realize that the problem was the white people. So he thought that if the white people were not around, African people could live in peace. And he was later on recruited by ANC and went to Swaziland to continue his studies. He still wanted to continue his studies and to get the higher education. But later on, while he was in the process of recruiting into the school, he found of another act of terror, we can say, where the South African police actually killed some ANC representatives back in Swaziland. So that was the time when he decided he's not going to study, instead he will go to Angola to learn to be a soldier. After he came back from Angola, and that was in the end of 1985, he came back to his own township, but didn't tell his friends and his family. And by the way, that is the house that he lived in. So he wasn't the poorest. His parents were pastor. His father was a pastor, and he still is. So he came back to the township, and he lived the life of solitude, basically. In December 1985, there was a raid by South African Defence Force into Lesotho, and 9 people were killed. Because of that, Andrew Zondo was tasked with staging a retaliation act within 3 days of that. So he chose a Matsitoti shopping center, a place that was frequented by white population, just before Christmas. Imagine how busy it is. And he planted the bomb next to South African Airlines office. That was the place that connected to the government in his mind. That bomb killed 5 people, including 2 children. When he was later on detained, just a few days after it happened, and during the court you could see his testimony about how he felt during the court. At one point of time, and those trials were quite often at this time, where the freedom fighters were sentenced, and a lot of supporters of the freedom fight would be the ones in the courtroom. Now, for his specific trial, they were mainly white people, and he thought that because he took lives of innocent people, which was never the way ANC worked. ANC specifically was teaching their soldiers to not target the peaceful population. That, he thought, was the reason why ANC turned away from him, and that is why they were not there. Now, in September 1986, he was sentenced to death on 5 counts of murder, and to life sentence for 40 people that were wounded. What do you think about the sentence? Was it harsh?
I mean, what is generally done with a white person and kills Black people?
That's a good question. It's something that would be interesting to look at. But there was the death sentence at the time, and even the presiding judge was the one who said, "We live in a divided society in which the monopoly of political power and its fruits is in the hands of the white section of the population, while the black section of the population in general is less affluent, less well off, and has fewer of the amenities of life. Life in the township has caused young black people to rebel and in their thousands leave their country for military training. Among such people was the accused. This was not an act for personal gain. He committed it as a way of serving his own people." But what makes this crime so appalling is that what he selected was the population as a whole. This was a deliberate, indiscriminate attack on the civil population.
I think anything with violence is just never going to be good, personally. So.
When this exhibition was opened in this museum in 2008, there were some vandals that put on the walls of the museum they spray painted the word murder. Now, do you think that is murder, that Andrew Zondo was murdered, or the murder that he's committed?
any freedom fight, you know, any person who was fighting for somebody's rights, it's always 2 points of view. Like Che Guevara, he is a hero for some people, but if you look at in reality, he is just a terrorist. And here, yes, he killed totally innocent people, but on the other hand, you mentioned against white people. It wasn't amongst white people, and we know that amongst white people, at this time, there were a lot of people who would be on the side of Africa.
Exactly.
But it was a system which was created by white people, and he was young, 19 years old, academically advantaged.
He had a bright future.
Bright future, yes, and I think for me, he's just example of
what
system does to what system would do to single person, and it's just outcome, and just he was
Desperate.
Desperate. Yeah, he was a
product of the system.
Exactly. Outcome. Exactly.
And the fact that he was sentenced to death, if he was given the life in prison, he would be alongside Nelson Mandela. Interestingly enough, is Mr. Smith was the father of the 4-year-old boy.
So he was the father of a 4-year-old boy.
Mr. Smith was the father of the 4-year-old boy that was killed in that accident.
I thought my son was a hero because he died for freedom. He died in the cause of the oppressed people. I've got no grudges against him. I mean, it was actually a rebellion. It was a war. In war, things happen that the generals don't play. Nobody plans it. It just happens.
Okay.
Several years ago, one of the roads in the Manzipoti that was just next to the shopping center was renamed under Andrew Zondo. And there was a big social outcry because a lot of people were saying, how can you name this street after the person who killed people? Interestingly, the father of Andrew Zondo was the one who opposed it. He said, it's not the right place to put my son's name on. If you want to keep the memories of him, do it in our township. But don't put it in the place which will always remind people what he did.
This world is not perfect. How are we?
Я надеялась, что вам будет So I would like to end our tour over here. Apologies for the storage going on there. There is a little bit of cleanup. This is the indigenous garden, and it's the view from here to a traditional healer is quite symbolic. It represents the process of healing as a nation. Now, just like with any wound, it has to be opened to heal. So here the courtyard itself represents the transition of South Africa from segregation time towards the democracy. So the mural and the shadows of the past statue is the symbol of the apartheid and segregation, while the medicine garden here represents recognition, healing, and reconciliation. Now I would like to quote former Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who stated, "Forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or our loved ones are not about pretending that things are the way other than they are. It is not about patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, and the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end it is worthwhile, because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. In this indigenous garden, you can see the tree that is that was here from the times of Mr. Bergman. That on the corner. Yes, that is the one that you can see.
That one on the far corner.
Yes, on the far corner. Now, South Africa cannot ignore its history, and the fact that many South Africans actually survived the abuses of the past is what we can say a true victory. And as the authors of the proposal that you could see in the plaque stated, it is very important to celebrate the human capacity in all its diversity and richness to overcome. So on this note, I would like to say thank you for being here on my tour. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. How has it been for you? Have you done this?
Well, it's my officially second tour that I'm taking. I'm taking around, but I've been here a lot to study, and it is a very special place to me.
Yeah, it's very heartfelt to see that that you're grieving for the pains of others as well. You know, despite race. And this is really where I think healing takes place, is when everyone, in any race, doesn't matter where they come from, can feel the pain that they've gone through. Because that's really where I think healing can really cure so much for them, is that acknowledgement that they've been wrongdoing, you know. And it's so inspiring to see, you know, you come, where are you from?
Russia.
Russia. Yes, exactly. So there's, I think that's great. Thank you so much for representing this.
So,
all right, so just to close up, what are your thoughts on the tour?
It's not my honestly, it's not my first time here, but every time I'm finding something new, and with Tanya, every time she points some details, which is wow, gives a wow effect. Thank you, thank you.
Well, it was heartfelt, it was beautiful, a lot of learning, like you learn something new all the time. It just goes to show that no matter how much you know about your past, there's always something new to learn. Like I've learned a lot today, so good job.
First of all, thank you very much to Tanya for inviting me, and yeah, it was very, I don't know, I learned a lot, but it was quite emotional. Thank you.
I also gonna cry a lot, but it just doesn't come in my mind. How can you, like, somebody just goes through all this and then they just put it on the stamp and say, go home. I don't know how you can just do that. It's okay, you can come in and say, and you can't.
That's crazy,
It
yeah.
makes no sense. And I really learned a lot more things about apartheid today.
I learned things I didn't expect at all. Tanya explained it really well, and I just can't believe our past was once like this.
Thank you, Tanya, for a wonderful tour. It was very interesting for me. I'm my first time in this museum. I learned a lot about the history of South Africa, and it was hard time. And tour was done very professional. I like it. I'm sure she'll be a very good tour operator in future. And as Nelson Mandela said, you forgive but never forget. Eh? You can forgive. So that's very significant for this country, I think.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. For the latecomer?
Yes, I came late, but the little that I got was very, very informative and very profound, and I'm leaving already with a tear in my eye, you know, because I'm from Mexico, so my indigenous people have also suffered a great deal from the conquering of the European nations. Try to change our way of being, like the way that we live life in these countries, trying to impose a new belief system, a new way of living, and it has had great catastrophic effects on all of us. But we are finding a way to come together in unity to discover that in essence we are all in the same, just only diverse. And unfortunately we had to go through pain to get there, but it was very touching for me to see, and it's always touching for me to see when the white man can really empathize and acknowledge the pain that the minorities have gone through, and pay homage to them. And I think this is the first step, you know, by teaching us more about ourselves. Thanks.
All right,
Okay,
done.
that's